It was a very close race. Just 1 point separates El-Sayed from his opponent, Congresswoman Haley Stevens. But the victory is monumental for the progressive left. The race was a brawl, heated, personal, the most expensive Democratic Senate primary ever, and saw a historically high turnout.
The Democratic Party has just experienced one of its biggest political shakeups of the year. And according to CNN's latest discussion, the progressive wing may have just changed the future of the party. The panel breaks down Abdul El-Sayed's stunning victory in Michigan's Democratic Senate primary, what it means for the growing influence of progressives, whether establishment Democrats have a reason to be worried, and why Republicans believe this gives them a much better chance of flipping the seat in November. Now, if you're new here, I'm Bradley Hostin, and this is The Bradley Hostin Show. If you enjoy honest political commentary, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. As usual, let's watch the clip, and then I'll give you guys my thoughts afterwards.
It was a very close race. Just 1 point separates El-Sayed from his opponent, Congresswoman Haley Stevens. But the victory is monumental for the progressive left. The race was a brawl, heated, personal, the most expensive Democratic Senate primary ever, and saw a historically high turnout. Look, it was a win, a huge win for Abdul El-Sayed. It's much narrower than a lot of people thought going into this race. What is your big takeaway from how he pulled this off and what's next?
Well, I think what's next is the proving ground of November, because this is a huge moment in this story that we've been covering all summer long about what's happening inside the Democratic Party, no doubt. But now the concern, I mean, as you saw, Haley Stevens was within 15,000 votes. From the establishment side of the party, the whole reason so much of the establishment was coalescing around Stevens was because they have a concern that El-Sayed makes the general election tougher for them to hang on to this seat. And we won't know the answer to that until November. So this moment is a huge moment for the left progressive wing because it's not deep blue New York City. It's not Denver, Colorado. This is a major battleground state in a big statewide primary. But now we got to see if the progressive left's belief is, no, we can bring all the energy and actually win in the battleground state in a general election with a general electorate and be broadly appealing, or if the establishment concerns prove out to be true here.
Yeah, and just to look at his path, Abdul El-Sayed's path to victory, where he did well, where Haley Stevens did well. There's one county here, Washtenaw County, that's the home of Ann Arbor. The University of Michigan is there. Very academic, very educated district. He did extremely well, really ran up the score against Haley Stevens, winning there by 60.8% to Haley Stevens' 36%. But then when you move over to Wayne County, that's the neighboring district, Detroit, there, Haley Stevens winning in Wayne County, working class voters, a lot of black voters there. She wins by 6 points there. And then some of the swing districts that will be absolutely pivotal come November. Macomb County, the home of Reagan Democrats. You can see there, Haley Stevens again beating Abdul El-Sayed, this time by about 8 points there in that race. In the neighboring county, Oakland County, more Democratic area, still a suburban Michigan area, again showing where El-Sayed has to make up ground, losing by 6 points in that suburban county.
Yeah, I think this shows that, yes, I think anybody who believes anything can look at this race and take away what they want from it, right? Progressives won, and that's a huge win for the progressive base. But they woke up thinking that they were going to win by a lot more, and it was a lot narrower than some of the polling showed leading up to this race. And so that's a concern for the progressive base and in a way, a win for the establishment Democratic Party. And so it does show that despite El-Sayed winning, there's a lot of ground that he's going to have to make up in this general election. And that's what Republicans have been banking on. I've talked to Republicans over the past few months, and they've been open about it. They wanted him to win this race because they feel like the messaging is going to be easier. There's going to be more to attack. And you're already seeing, even this morning, how they're coming out and attacking him, right? They're targeting some of his more extreme ties. They're targeting some of his more progressive beliefs. That would have been much more difficult if he had lost. And
we're going to get more into the GOP strategy in the next block. The issue about Israel, the outside spending, AIPAC spending, I mean, what's just remarkable here? $32 million was spent by an AIPAC-aligned super PAC in this race. That's more than any other primary really ever that it's been involved with. $32 million. The next closest was $15 million a couple cycles ago, actually the last cycle in 2024. And then the overall outside spending for Stevens was $64 million on her behalf. A lot of this was that AIPAC spending. And then when you drill down in the numbers too, Andrew, even further, you go to Dearborn, which is the home of a lot of Muslim American voters. El-Sayed really ran up the score there, 78% to 20% to Stevens. He got more votes in this primary in Dearborn than Kamala Harris got in the general election, in the primary versus the general.
Right. I was in Michigan a couple of weeks ago at a rally that Abdul El-Sayed had with Bernie Sanders and other prominent progressives, and Senator Sanders had a line that stood out to me. He said, "This primary is not a race between Abdul El-Sayed and Haley Stevens. It's a race between Abdul El-Sayed and what he called the billionaire class." In other words, he was setting it up as a test of whether progressives and that grassroots passion and energy can defeat all of that money that was coming into the state sort of on the behalf of their opponent. But, you know, I find this really fascinating, too, in terms of being a test case for the future for progressives and helping cement Bernie Sanders' legacy as well. Because if you look at that contingent of progressives in the Senate right now, all of them come from these cobalt blue states, right? This is a chance for them to not only grow their ranks, but grow their ranks with someone who would be representing a purple state.
Yeah.
And I think that's a big deal for progressives because it flips the conventional wisdom about electability on its head. And of course, you saw Chuck Schumer endorse Haley Stevens because of, in his view, electability, because she had proven that she won tough races, all of her House races, for example.
Speaking of Chuck Schumer, who did get behind Haley Stevens and now is backing Abdul El-Sayed as they head into November. I asked him yesterday about the rise of the Democratic social swing and the party, what he thinks about that. Is the rise of the DSA good for your party?
Look, we are a big tent party, and being a big tent party is a strength, not a weakness.
Leader Schumer?
I guess that's a yes.
I guess so. I mean, what else could he say? And this is something that even on the House side, Hakeem Jeffries is going to have to deal with. The reason why is because regardless of whether the majority is flip in Democrats' favor or not, the margins are going to be narrow. And the DSA is coming in with an agenda. And clearly a win like this in Michigan, we'll see if El-Sayed can pull it off in the general, but it still gives them the argument that we are fighting against corporations, the establishment class, all of that. They're going to be putting, and I've heard this more on the House side, a lot of those DSA candidates going to start drawing some red lines and saying, hey, if you want to be speaker, if you want to be able to get your agenda done, these are the kind of things you have to address first.
Yeah.
We'll see how that all plays out.
Democrats were duking it out in the Michigan primary. Mike Rogers is already making his case for November. Here's what the Republican Senate candidate said on Fox this morning.
So we have the excitement in the Republican Party here has never been higher. Our numbers in the Republican Party are off the chart. People are ready for a change in Michigan, and that's what people have to understand. Democrats have been in charge here 10 years in Lansing, or better part of a decade, and over a quarter century in the United States Senate. And only thing has happened is we are worse in every metric category we have here in the state.
David Chalian, what are you watching for as Mike Rogers pivots to the general election?
Well, it wasn't just Mike Rogers, but his allies, like the campaign committee and the Super PAC, SLF, put out digital ads this morning. Right, you could just see they're immediately framing it to make Abdul El-Sayed as far outside the mainstream as possible in this battleground state. And I think you heard from Abdul El-Sayed today. I think you'll hear it, no doubt, from Democrats as they sort of start unifying in Michigan. They will paint Rogers as a total Washington, D.C. insider, only looking out for corporate interests and not your personal interests, another sort of just vote for Trump, right? Like that'll be, and so those two messages, I mean, that's going to be the general election for Michigan as we head into these final 90 days. And you saw Rogers there just immediately wanting to get out as soon as this primary closed to start framing El-Sayed in that way.
And this is how the two campaign committees framed the general election as well, putting out ads just this morning.
There's corruption, and then there's Mike Rogers' corruption. Rogers took over $1 million from the drug industry, more than 95% of all members of the House. then fought to keep our prescription drug prices the highest in the world.
Abdul Muhammad El-Sayed, the most radical Senate candidate in America.
Pretty dangerous.
El-Sayed pledged support for the leader of the Muslim Brotherhood, a designated foreign terrorist group.
In Sayed, actually, El-Sayed made that point in that press conference today, where he noted that they're saying his full name, Abdul Rahman Muhammad El-Sayed, which I'm sure you'll hear a lot more of.
Oh yeah. We're already seeing exactly how this is going to play out, and it's going to be a really tight race. One of the
really
most
ugly race too.
Ugly race. One of the most interesting things I think in Mike Rogers is the fact that he is not really commenting on national politics at all, which is a really interesting strategy. It's essentially the opposite strategy of what we saw in New York in the mayor's race, right?
When he gets asked about these issues, he really hasn't been asked a ton about these issues.
He hasn't. My colleague asked him several questions about national politics. He's pretty much punted on all of them. He said he's focusing on the local issues. Which is an interesting strategy, because you know that Democrats are going to be, as you said, tying him in with Donald Trump. And that's fairly easy to do. I think people forget that he was one of the last contenders to be FBI director before it went to Kash Patel. And so he is very close with the president. And you're seeing how he's going to try to go that fine line between not breaking with the president, but also not directly talking about it.
And it's interesting. Yeah, they want to talk about local issues, but guess what? You're a senator. You're going to have to deal with some national issues.
And
that's
he was
you're
chairman of the House Intelligence Committee.
Exactly.
I mean, like,
I think
got that
done this
background.
before.
Yeah, exactly.
So, there were a few things that really stood out to me in that discussion. First and foremost, congratulations to Abdul El-Sayed, because regardless of where you sit politically, this was a huge victory. Coming into this race, the Democratic establishment threw everything they had behind Haley Stevens. Millions upon millions of dollars were spent trying to stop him. Endorsements poured in. Outside groups got heavily involved, and yet he still managed to come away with the victory. That's significant. Now, the second thing that stood out to me is that this race exposed a genuine divide inside the Democratic Party. On one side, you've got the establishment arguing that progressive candidates are too risky to win battleground states. And on the other, you've got progressives saying the only way Democrats are going to energize voters is by actually standing for something. That debate isn't going away anytime soon. But here's where I think Republicans might be getting a little ahead of themselves. Throughout the discussion, you heard Republicans saying this is exactly the candidate they wanted Democrats to nominate because they think it'll be easier to attack him in the general election. Maybe they're right, maybe they're wrong, but here's the thing. People said very similar things about other progressive candidates before, and some of them went on to win. So I don't think either side should be celebrating just yet. One thing I did find interesting was the amount of outside money that poured into this race. Regardless of whether you're a Democrat or a Republican, I think most Americans are tired of seeing tens of millions of dollars being spent trying to influence elections. It reinforces the belief that big donors and special interests have far too much influence over politics, and I completely understand why voters become cynical when they see that happening. Now the real test begins. Winning a primary is one thing. Winning a statewide general election in a battleground state like Michigan is something completely different. That's where we'll find out whether this victory represents a major shift in Democratic politics, or whether establishment Democrats were right to worry about electability all along. For me, though, the biggest takeaway is simple. This wasn't just a victory for one candidate. It was a referendum on where Democratic voters want their party to go next. Whether that direction ultimately leads to success in November is a completely different question, and it's one we'll all be watching very closely. Let me know your guys' thoughts down in the comment section below. Do you think Democrats made the right choice, or do you think Republicans now have the advantage heading into November? As usual, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more news commentaries. I'll see you guys in the next one.